Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome back to Mind-Blowing Stories. I'm your host, Grandpa Frank, and if you're new here, well, chuckles. 96 of you watching this are new here because you haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Come on, folks, it's free, and it helps an old man like me feel a little less lonely in this big digital world. Now, before we dive into today's story, please, and I mean please, hit that like button if you enjoy what you hear, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment down below. I read every single one, and your thoughts mean the world to me. This channel has hundreds of stories, and trust me, each one will blow your mind just as much as this one will. All right, grab your coffee, get comfortable, because today I'm going to tell you about the greatest love story of my life. And folks, let me tell you, this one's got more twists than a pretzel factory. I'm 65 years old now, been retired from the auto plant for about 5 years, and I've got nothing but time to share these stories with you. This particular story, well, it took me over 4 decades to fully understand what really happened. So picture this. It's 1982, I'm 24 years old, fresh out of trade school, working as a mechanic at Tony's Auto Shop in downtown Chicago. Hair down to my shoulders. Yeah, I had hair back then. Bell-bottom jeans, the whole 9 yards. I thought I knew everything about life, love, and the American dream. Boy, was I wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in October, crisp autumn air, leaves turning those beautiful Illinois colors. I just finished fixing Mrs. Thompson's Buick, transmission problems, nothing too fancy, and I decided to grab lunch at Vinny's Diner on State Street. This wasn't some fancy place, mind you. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, the works. The kind of place where truckers, factory workers, and regular folks could get a decent burger for $2. I'm sitting there minding my own business, reading the Chicago Tribune, and working on a meatloaf special when she walks in. And folks, let me tell you, time literally stopped. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I swear on my mother's grave, everything in that diner went quiet for just a moment. Her name was Susan Parker. She had this auburn hair that caught the light just right, green eyes that seemed to see right through you, and she wore this simple blue dress that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. But it wasn't her looks that got me, though Lord knows she was beautiful. It was the way she carried herself. Confident, but with this underlying sadness that made you want to protect her. She sat 2 booths away from me, ordered just coffee and a slice of apple pie. I kept stealing glances, trying to work up the courage to say something. Finally, I did what any red-blooded American boy would do. I walked over and asked if the seat across from her was taken. "Depend," she said, looking up at me with those emerald eyes. "Are you going to try to impress me with stories about muscle cars and football?" I laughed. Couldn't help it. "No, ma'am. I was actually going to ask if you think the Bears have any chance this season." She smiled then, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. "Sit down, mechanic boy. Let's see what you're really made of." We talked for 3 hours. 3 hours? Poor Vinny probably wanted to kick us out, but Susan ordered another coffee, and I got a piece of that famous apple pie. We talked about everything. Music, books, dreams, the changing world around us. She was smart, folks. Smarter than anyone I'd ever met. She'd gone to college, University of Illinois, and had studied literature. She could quote Shakespeare and knew about art and all these things I'd never been exposed to growing up in working-class Detroit. But here's the thing that struck me as odd. Even then, she never really talked about herself. Her current life, I mean. She'd talk about college, about books, about her thoughts on the world. But when I asked about her job or where she lived, she changed the subject smooth as silk. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying this story, folks. And seriously, that subscribe button is just sitting there looking lonely. So we started meeting every Tuesday at Vinny's. Same time, same booth. It became our thing. I'd finish work, clean up as best I could, and race over there, heart pounding like I was 16 again. She was always there first, always with that same coffee and pie, always with a new book or magazine to discuss. After about a month of these Tuesday meetings, I finally worked up the courage to ask her out on a real date. "Susan," I said, "how about we skip Vinny's next week and go see a movie? There's this new E.T. film everyone's talking about." She got quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee with this faraway look in her eyes. Finally, she said, "Frank, there's something you should know about me. It's complicated." Now I was young and stupid and head over heels in love, so I said, "I don't care how complicated it is. We'll figure it out together." She looked at me for the longest time, and I could see her wrestling with something internal. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but not the movies. Meet me at Millennium Park Saturday afternoon, by the fountain, 2 o'clock. That Saturday was the longest morning of my life. I must have changed clothes 4 times, borrowed my buddy Danny's car, a '79 Firebird that actually ran decent, and showed up at Millennium Park 30 minutes early. The park was beautiful that day. October leaves everywhere, families having picnics, kids playing. Susan showed up wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. We walked around the park, talking and laughing. She bought us hot dogs from a vendor, and we sat by Lake Michigan watching the boats. It felt perfect, natural, like we'd been doing this for years. As the sun started setting, painting the sky all orange and pink, she turned to me and said, "Frank, I need to tell you something. I'm married." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, just completely winded. "Married?" I managed to croak out. "Yes, but it's not. It's not a real marriage. Not in the way you'd think." She looked out at the water, choosing her words carefully. "My husband, Richard, he's not a good man, Frank. I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to trust me when I say that what we have, these feelings, they're real. More real than anything in my life right now. I should have walked away. Any sensible person would have walked away. But I was young and in love, and she had this way of making you believe anything was possible." "Are you in danger?" I asked. She looked at me then, and for just a second I saw something flash in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or something else. "Not the kind you're thinking of," she said. "If you're still with me, folks, please drop a comment below. I love hearing from you, and it really helps the channel grow." So began the strangest 6 months of my life. Susan and I would meet every Tuesday at Vinny's and most Saturdays at different places around Chicago. Sometimes Millennium Park, sometimes the Art Institute of Chicago. She loved showing me paintings and explaining what made them special. Sometimes we'd just drive around in Danny's borrowed car, talking about life and dreams and all the things young people talk about when they think they have forever. She never let me pick her up at home, never gave me a phone number. When I asked about meeting this mysterious husband of hers, she'd get that same distant look and change the subject. I knew she lived somewhere in Lincoln Park, the rich part of town, because once I followed her after she left Vinny's. I know, not my proudest moment, but I was desperate to understand her situation. I watched her get into this pristine black Mercedes and drive toward the fancy suburbs. I tried to follow, but Danny's Firebird wasn't exactly built for stealth, and I lost her after a few miles. The strange thing was, Susan seemed to know things she shouldn't have known. Like when Tony's auto shop was going to get that big contract with the city. She mentioned it a week before Tony even told us. Or when there was going to be a police raid on Mickey's bar down the street. She casually suggested we avoid that area one particular evening, and sure enough, the place got shut down for illegal gambling. I started wondering who exactly I'd fallen in love with. Things came to a head in April of 1983. Susan seemed different that Tuesday. Nervous, jumpy, checking her watch constantly. She'd barely touched her pie, and she kept looking toward the door like she was expecting someone. "Frank," she said suddenly, reaching across the table and grabbing my hand. "If something happens to me, I need you to promise me something." "Nothing's going to happen to you," I said, but my heart was racing. "Promise me," she insisted. "If I disappear, if you don't see me for a while, don't come looking for me. Don't ask questions. Just remember that what we had was real, okay?" I was about to argue when the bell above Vinny's door chimed, and this man walked in. Tall, maybe 40 years old, expensive suit, silver hair slicked back. He looked around the diner with these cold blue eyes until he spotted Susan, and then he smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile, folks. It was the kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. Susan went completely pale. She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt and whispered, "That's Richard, my husband." The man, Richard, walked over to our booth with this casual confidence that somehow felt threatening. "Susan, darling," he said in this smooth voice, "you missed our dinner reservation. I was worried." His eyes flicked to me, taking in my work clothes and grease-stained hands. "And who might this be?" "Richard, this is Joe. Joe, my husband, Richard Parker." Richard extended his hand, and when I shook it, his grip was firm to the point of being painful. "Pleasure to meet you, Joe. I hope you haven't been keeping my wife too long. She has responsibilities at home." The whole interaction lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. Susan gathered her purse, gave me one last meaningful look, and left with Richard. I watched through the window as they got into that black Mercedes, saw them having what looked like a heated conversation, and then they drove away. That was the last time I saw Susan for 3 weeks. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, folks. It really helps support the channel, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this story ends. When she finally showed up at Vinny's again, she looked like she'd been through hell. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she was thinner, more fragile somehow. But when she saw me, she smiled that same brilliant smile that had captured my heart months ago. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "For what? You don't owe me any explanations." But of course, I was dying to know what had happened. We fell back into our routine, but something had changed. Susan was more careful now, more paranoid. She checked the parking lot before coming into Vinny's, and she insisted we start meeting at different places, never the same location twice in a row. It was during one of these meetings, at a little coffee shop in Evanston, that she told me the truth, or what I thought was the truth at the time. "Frank, I'm going to leave him," she said quietly, stirring her coffee with shaking hands. "I can't live like this anymore. He's involved in things, bad things, and I'm afraid of what might happen if I stay." "What kind of things?" I asked. She looked around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening. "Money laundering, connections to some very dangerous people. Richard owns several legitimate businesses, a construction company, a couple of restaurants. But it's all a front. He cleans money for, well, let's just say people you don't want to owe favors to." My blood ran cold. This was 1983, and Chicago had its share of organized crime problems. Everyone knew stories. Everyone had heard whispers. But I'd never thought I'd be sitting across from someone who was living in the middle of it. "We need to go to the police," I said immediately. Susan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Frank, you sweet, naive boy. You think Richard doesn't have connections in the police department? You think he stayed out of jail this long by accident? Then what are we going to do?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm going to disappear, and I want you to come with me." Folks, I want you to imagine being 25 years old, madly in love, and having the woman of your dreams ask you to run away with her. It sounds romantic, doesn't it? Like something out of a movie. But sitting there in that coffee shop, all I could think about was how scared she looked. "Where would we go?" I asked. I have some money saved. We could go west. California, maybe Oregon. Start fresh. I could get a job teaching. You could work in any garage. We could have a real life, Frank. A normal life. I should have said yes immediately. That's what the movies would have you believe, right? Love conquers all. Take the leap. Follow your heart. But I hesitated. I thought about my job, my family, my whole life in Chicago. I thought about starting over in a place where I didn't know anyone, looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Give me a few days to think about it, I said. The disappointment in her eyes nearly killed me, but she nodded. Okay, but Frank, don't take too long. I have a feeling time is running out. That was Thursday. On Sunday morning, I woke up to pounding on my apartment door. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, holding a copy of the Chicago Tribune with tears in her eyes. Frank, honey, she said, isn't this that girl you've been seeing? The headline read, Lincoln Park businessman missing, wife sought for questioning. Below it was a picture of Susan. According to the article, Richard Parker had disappeared sometime Friday night. His car was found abandoned near Lake Michigan, and there were signs of a struggle. Susan had also vanished, and the police wanted to question her in connection with his disappearance. The article mentioned Richard's business connections and hinted at possible mob involvement. I felt like the world was spinning. My first instinct was to call the police, to tell them everything I knew about Susan and Richard. But then I remembered her words about Richard having connections in the department, and I hesitated. Instead, I drove to every place Susan and I had ever met, hoping to find her, hoping she'd reach out somehow. But there was nothing. She'd vanished completely, just like she'd warned me she might. Don't forget to like this video and let me know in the comments what you think happened. I love reading your theories. For the next 2 months, I was a wreck. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. Tony almost fired me twice for making stupid mistakes on repairs. Every time I heard a siren, I expected the police to show up and arrest me as an accomplice or something. The case was all over the local news for a few weeks. Richard Parker's body was never found, and Susan remained the primary suspect. The police uncovered evidence of Richard's money laundering operation, and several of his business associates were arrested. But Susan had disappeared completely, as if she'd never existed. I started to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe she was some kind of elaborate hallucination brought on by loneliness and too much overtime. But then I'd remember the way she smelled like lavender and vanilla, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes, the way her hand felt in mine, and I knew it had all been real. Time has a way of healing wounds, even ones that seem impossible to heal. I eventually got my head back together, focused on work, and tried to move on with my life. I dated other women, had a few relationships that lasted a year or two, but nothing ever felt the same. Nothing ever felt like those Tuesday afternoons at Vinnie's. I ended up marrying a wonderful woman named Patricia in 1987. She was a teacher, kind and patient, and everything a man could ask for. We had 2 kids, Michael and Sarah, and I tried to be a good husband and father. But sometimes late at night, I'd find myself wondering what had happened to Susan Parker. Patricia passed away in 2018. Cancer, fought it for 2 years like the warrior she was. After the funeral, after the kids went back to their own lives, I found myself with a lot of time to think about the past. That's when I started this YouTube channel, actually. Figured if I was going to spend my retirement years thinking about old stories, might as well share them with people who might find them interesting. But here's where this story takes its biggest twist, folks. And if you've made it this far, you're going to want to hear this. 3 months ago, March of 2024, so just a few months back, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, postmarked from Washington, D.C. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a time. 1247 Lakefront Drive, Millennium Park. Saturday 2 p.m. Come alone. Etam. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. After 41 years, could it really be her? That Saturday, I drove to Millennium Park for the first time since 1982. The park had changed some, been renovated and updated, but the basic layout was the same. I found the address. It was near the same fountain where we'd met for our first real date all those decades ago. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons from a small bag of breadcrumbs. Her hair was silver now and she wore glasses, but I would have recognized her anywhere. Susan Parker, or whoever she really was, barely looked like she'd aged a day past 50. "Hello, Frank," she said without looking up as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I sat down next to her, my heart pounding, just like it had when I was 25. "Susan, is it really you?" She turned to look at me then, and those green eyes were exactly the same. "It's really me, though Susan Parker was never my real name." "Then who are you?" She smiled that same smile that had captured my heart 41 years ago. "My real name is Jennifer Walsh. I was an FBI agent, Frank. I was working undercover to build a case against Richard and his associates." The world tilted sideways. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship, about what had happened, suddenly looked completely different. "Richard wasn't really your husband?" "Oh, he was my husband. That part was real. But our marriage was part of my cover. The Bureau needed someone on the inside of Richard's operation, and the best way to do that was to become his wife. I'd been undercover for 2 years when I met you. I don't mind telling you folks, this is when my brain started to short circuit. So everything between us was real," she said firmly. "That's why I'm here, Frank. That's why I risked everything to see you again. What happened between us wasn't part of any operation. It wasn't planned or sanctioned by the Bureau. I fell in love with a sweet, honest mechanic from Chicago, and it nearly destroyed everything I'd worked for. Please hit that subscribe button, folks. I promise you've never heard a story like this before." Jennifer, I was still having trouble thinking of her as anyone other than Susan, continued her story. The night Richard disappeared, she'd finally gotten the evidence the FBI needed to bring down his entire operation. Financial records, recorded conversations, names and dates that would put away dozens of people involved in money laundering and worse. But Richard had started to suspect something. He'd been asking questions, having her followed, going through her things. The night he disappeared, he'd confronted her directly. "He knew," she said. "He'd figured out I was federal. He was going to kill me, Joe. He had a gun, and he was going to make it look like a murder-suicide. But my backup arrived just in time." "Your backup?" The Bureau had been monitoring the situation. They knew Richard was getting suspicious, and they were ready to extract me if necessary. When he pulled the gun, they moved in. Richard hadn't been killed, as it turned out. He'd been arrested and flipped, agreeing to testify against his associates in exchange for witness protection. His disappearance had been staged to protect both him and Jennifer, while the FBI rounded up the rest of the organization. "So you've been in witness protection all this time?" I asked. "For a while, yes. But the case was wrapped up years ago. Most of Richard's associates are dead or in prison. Richard himself died of a heart attack in 2003, still in protection. I've been free to resume my normal life for over a decade now." "Then why didn't you contact me sooner?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I was a coward. Because I'd spent so many years living lies and assuming false identities that I wasn't sure I remembered how to be real anymore. Because I was afraid you'd moved on, found someone better, forgotten all about a woman who lied to you for 6 months." I reached over and took her hand, just like I had all those years ago at Sal's diner. I never forgot, not for a single day. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Detroit River flow by. Finally, she spoke again. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was a picture of us from that first Saturday at Belle Isle, taken by some tourist we'd asked to capture the moment. I'd forgotten it existed. I've carried this with me for 45 years, she said, through every assignment, every relocation, every new identity. It reminded me that I'd had something real once, something worth remembering. What happens now? I asked. She smiled. Now we're both retired, both free, both old enough to know that time is precious and shouldn't be wasted. I was hoping maybe we could try again, see if what we had was strong enough to survive all these years and all these lies. Folks, I'm not ashamed to tell you that I cried. Right there on that bench in Belle Isle Park, I cried like a baby. Happy tears, mostly, but also tears for all the lost years, all the might have beens, all the time we could have had together if circumstances had been different. I'd like that, I managed to say. I'd like that very much. So here I am 3 months later telling you this story. Jennifer, I'm still getting used to calling her that, moved back to Detroit last month. We're taking things slow, getting to know each other again, figuring out who we are as the people we've become rather than the people we were. She's nothing like I expected and everything I remembered. She's still brilliant, still beautiful, still has that way of making you feel like you're the most important person in the world when she's talking to you. But she's also more at peace now, more settled. The fear and paranoia that used to follow her around is gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that comes from having survived something most people could never imagine. We have dinner every Tuesday night, usually at this little Italian place downtown. It's not Sal's that closed years ago, but it has the same comfortable feeling. We talk about everything and nothing, catching up on 45 years of separate lives, making plans for whatever time we have left together. I know some of you might be thinking this sounds too good to be true, like something out of a movie. Trust me, I thought the same thing. But sometimes, just sometimes, life gives you a second chance at something you thought was lost forever. Jennifer showed me her FBI credentials, her commendations, even some of the case files from the Richard Parker investigation. It's all real, folks, every bit of it. She spent 30 years working for the Bureau after our case closed, specializing in organized crime and financial fraud. She's got stories that would make your hair stand on end, but she says most of them are still classified. What I can tell you is that the woman I fell in love with in 1978 was real. The feelings were real. The connection was real. Everything else, the fear, the secrets, the lies, that was just the job. And now that the job is over, we get to find out what we really are together. So there you have it, folks. The greatest love story of my life, complete with more twists and turns than a Hollywood thriller. It took 45 years to get our happy ending, but sometimes the best things are worth waiting for. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to Mind Blowing Stories. I've got hundreds more stories to share, and trust me, each one is as wild as this one. Leave me a comment below. I love hearing from you, and it really helps the channel grow. And remember, 96 of you watching this haven't subscribed yet. Come on, folks, help an old man out. It's free, it helps support the channel, and you'll never know what crazy story I'm going to tell next. Until next time, this is Grandpa Joe reminding you that sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the truest ones of all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story.